I am NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the Urban Legend section of the Lore Breakdown. Significantly tougher foes await the library from this point onwards. Foes that can actually be taken quite seriously. An urban legend can be defined as a more recent story, with not a lot, if anything, to support it. Those that do spread this, well, it has elements of the ridiculous, the ridiculously humorous, the ridiculously horrific, or just the ridiculous. For some reason, this is confused for an urban myth, at least in the United Kingdom English Dictionary. What does this imply? That Project Moon thinks more of the Americans? Well, regardless of the reason, urban legend is one up from urban myth in this, which means tougher guests and abnormalities to deal with. Speaking of which, next is a returning abnormality for Roland to deal with. The Heart of Aspiration. In the facility, this was a tool abnormality, which was something that was harmless by itself, but with an employee, it could be dangerous. It could be a representation of what Carmen had that helped to push her over the edge. Her aspiration was certainly strong, especially with what she had planned, which led to her eventual collapse when things got really bad. It also likely represented her her fear of failure, as in what happened to drive her to suicide, such as the death of Enoch. As for what it did in the facility, it increased the HP and attack speed of the employee that had it. But if it was returned without that employee attacking anything, or if it returned to its containment unit within 30 seconds, it would drive that employee insane and turn them into a homicidal maniac. As if they had Get Ready to Die by Andrew W.K. permanently playing in their heads. But in the library, that's not how this works. This time, it's violent towards those that it encounters. It's a heart that's now the size of a human that uses its veins as arms and legs. It also has friends to back it up. Yeah. That didn't happen last time. The Heart of Aspiration attacking by itself and having helped to attack others. As for the friends, they're not as powerful as the Heart of Aspiration, the Lungs of Craving. Two minions that are similar to the heart, but are lungs that have a windpipe for a head, and walk on their trachea. If these were to represent anything, it'd be how we have this craving for knowledge, and that if we don't keep this under control, we'd keep drawing it in until we're unable to stop. Yeah, that certainly fits Carmen as well. She certainly was driven to developing and creating the cure for the disease of the soul, or the mind, or whatever you want to call it. That's what she was working on. As for the heart itself, it focuses on the beats. Every time things go wrong, the constant wishing for things, things, how excessive aspiration leads to self-destruction. Sound familiar? It's not just Carmen that this applies to. It knew that excessive aspiration would be too much for whoever had it, unless they did something to sate it. It beats faster when landing a hit with the beats of aspiration, wanting to see an end to it. As for what Roland's take on this is, he saw them as weird creatures and was surprised that it used to give power, comparing it to something that wouldn't be out of place in a long-running sci-fi series. As for the librarian assisting him, they were familiar with the heart's power, but found the stage that they were fighting in to be nauseating. Well, they're not surgeons, so I can understand that. The Heart of Aspiration's stage looks like it's made of flesh. Yes, it is quite fleshy, complete with veins and the sound of a beating heart that's constant. This gets faster when the lungs of craving are defeated, and as a result, the heart becomes near defeat. Upon defeating this abnormality, the floor of general works was granted the power of the Heart of Aspiration. After this, Roland called the lower floor patron librarians to Angela. That's Malkuth, Yesod, Hod, and Nezhak. While Angela admitted that it was a while since they were all gathered in one place, the atmosphere was so tense you could slice it up, deep fry it, and serve it with noodles, rice, fries, or whatever you want to accompany it. Well, depends on what kind of cooking you prefer. Personally, it should be served with salt, as that's what the patron librarians have enough of. Yasud asked what she was trying to accomplish with that. She wanted a meet-up with them, while Roland wanted to calm the situation down. Hode was speaking for the others when she said that they had nothing to talk about with the likes of her. Well, except Nezhak. He had a problem with the process of retrieving the light, such as killing those invited into the library and turning them into books. What, even those that won't be missed, such as psycho-cannibals and brutal syndicates? Why would you not want to get rid of those amoral scumbags? Well, Angela understood this much, that they don't want to kill guests with their own hands and suffer themselves. Malkuth agreed with Nezhak. Even if they came in, she feels as if there's a difference between a thief and a con artist. The main difference being one asks for permission to rob them, the other doesn't. She feels that they shouldn't drive people to death as part of their work again. Yeah, I can understand you there, but unfortunately your hands are tied. At least for the time being. Angela was not sympathetic, as they killed a huge amount of employees in the facility, and they were apparently okay with that, and yet they're upset with killing a few strangers. Well, depends on what they were. Some would not be missed. Others, they were either trying to get by or maintaining order. She was calling them out on their hypocrisy, seeing them as below her, as at least she seeks agreement from the guests. Yeah. Agreement. Keep telling yourself that. It might make it more convenient for you. As for Nezhak, he thought that it would be the end for them, but it's still going on. Yesold reminded him that their hands were tied and she wouldn't listen to them, even if they tried to get through to her, as, in the words of Hode, one of the more moderate of them, she's cold and heartless. Yeah. Yet, Angela chided her on being emotional and told them that they know that this is the only way. If they didn't want this, then they shouldn't have tried to stop her in the first place. Since that we're on the subject of hypocrisy, Angela, you spoke of vengeance. Vengeance on Ayin for the torment he gave you. Yet here you are, doing things his way. You might have made it more polite and fair with the invitation system, but the fact is, you're doing things the same way without the script preventing you from doing things differently. And as for blaming them for your actions, that's victim blaming, as in blaming the victim of a crime for what others have done. Reminds me of what Richard II said to the surviving leaders of the peasant revolt of 1381. He said, "Rustics you were, and rustics you are still. You will remain in bondage, not as before, but incomparably harsher. For as long as we live, we shall strive to suppress you, and your misery will be an example in the eyes of posterity. However, we will spare your lives if you remain faithful and loyal. Choose now which course you want to follow." In this case, Angela has a similar role to King Richard II, and the rustics, or peasants, are the patron librarians that she's familiar with. They'll still be forced into doing something, but this time under a harsher master. So far, this appears to be the case, but we need more to go on. If Angela thought that this meeting would help bridge the gap between them, all it did was widen it. Yeah. This plan, if you can call it a plan, failed miserably. Well, we know what she did. She interrupted the seed of light and took it for herself in order to make the library. And she seemed to suspect what would happen. What else did she know? In fact, there are still a few questions left unanswered. How Roland got inside and invited. Questions that will have to remain unanswered, at least for now. For now, let us keep moving with the lore breakdown. Let us move on to the Zwei Association. An association within the city that focuses on peacekeeping and protecting the people within the areas that falls within their contract. contracts. Their motto being, "Your shield," despite the fact that they wield Zweihanders. Their role is the equivalent of police, or, if you want to be less charitable, private security, or rent-a-cops. They have a professional mentality and don't usually put their personal feelings above the terms of their contracts, and they won't extend their area of operation, at least not unless whoever desires it is willing to pay for them. As public service, that's so last century. Or however long it's been since that concept in the Project Moon universe was considered viable. As for how they operate, they have a defensive stance when it comes to combat, as they value protecting their clients over taking down those that they're protecting them from. We're dealing with as close to paladins as possible to have in that world, not blood knights, as in those that would treat the battlefield like an amusement park or a big party. They'd have the time of their lives. As for when they undertake operations, they need enough evidence, or it's not looked into. They can't look into all of them, and will only take those that have the highest priority, even when there's enough evidence. In this case, it focuses on the southern branch of the association, in Section 6. Slightly above the streetlight office, but not by much. When the library had recently become an urban myth, okay, not that recently, but you get the idea, they were investigating the laundry of dreams and yesterday's promise, two urban plague-type threats, along with the Church of Gears, which was an urban legend-type threat. As for the mentality of your typical Zwei fixer, they believe that if you want them to risk their lives for you, they won't do it for free, due to the risk to their lives that comes with the job. The back streets are the only parts of the city where there's demand for their services. The Nest, on the other hand, nests are usually safe from threats. Syndicates might be cheaper, but a deal with the devil ends the same way, with more than an full of untold agony for whoever made the deal. Associations are divided into different sections, with Section 1 being the highest, and Section 6 being the lowest, where the higher you are, the higher you're paid and the better treated you are. It takes much to get out of Section 6, apparently. Okay, I think one reason why the Zwei Association doesn't use shields when its motto is "your shield," besides the fact that a Zweihander fits the Zwei Association. It's because it'd be a bit too, how can I put it, Captain America? Okay, that's more a out-of-universe reason. In-universe, it'd be more likely to say that even with augmentations, there's likely to be something that would get around the shield, or even through it. I mean, it's more likely to hinder their work than give a good impression. I mean, a Zweihander can cleave through it, and if you define shield as protecting others from those threats out there, why not go with it? First we have Julia. She's one of the associate fixers of this association. She goes back with Isadora and San. She's kind-hearted, cares about her friends. Another rare one. The disease of the soul clearly hasn't affected everyone outside. That's Carmen, San, Finn. They are likely to be... Well, there's likely to be others. She certainly has a desire to help San, even though her hands are tied by procedure. She also likes Isadora's Cinderella tendencies. Don't ask me why. I haven't figured it out. If you have, please put it in the comments. On her first day, she was hesitant to enter her first fixer office. She overheard San and Isadora. They were arguing with each other. When San pointed out that she wasn't entering because he was giving a pathetic expression, he told her that it was because her facial expression was intimidating her, which resulted in a kick in the shin. The puckering of Isadora's lips a few seconds after Julia entered made her laugh. Clearly, Isadora didn't take it personally, or rather, thankfully, she didn't take it personally, as they seemed to get on quite well. Oh yes, speaking of which, next we have Isadora, a childhood friend of San, and another of the associate fixers of the Zwei Association. She partners up with Julia. She can be prone to acting on emotions without thinking about them, but she is often a stickler to rules and procedures, even with her close friends. Even so, she can be depended on. She'll do what she can within her means to do so. She might seem almost as harsh as a US Army drill sergeant when dealing with new recruits. She's also a tsundere, or at least has tsundere tendencies, as she's easily flustered, possibly due to an insecurity with her feelings, how they conflict with her desire to do things by the book. Well, books are what this revolves around. Deep down, she finds it funny that San is still a coward, and yet her memory is blurry when it comes to that incident after dark, where San protected her against an unspecified threat, one that's clearly deterred by a tree branch, of all things. Yeah, those two were mentioned, but now we have a little more info on them, at least from their perspectives. Next, we have someone that has no prior connections to anyone previously mentioned. That is, of course, the director of Section 6, Walter. He's the stoic type and is unwavering to what he aims for. He values the contracts that either include good enough payments or those that might provide something that benefits his career. So financial or career-based rewards. That's his motivation. He sees that demand for protection, in the case of the Zwei Association, as in how that is concerned, is what brings requests to their attention, and more of those means more money, which he sees as the prime objective of an association. He doesn't see the risk level as what makes the grade of a threat. It's about how many people are willing to pay them to make it go away. Yep, he's a psychopath. Not the serial killer kind, just the ruthless individual kind. Yeah, there are more of those than you might think. Finally, we have San, the operator and the sole survivor of the streetlight office, after Mars and Lulu were systematically defeated in there. His story continues in this, so there's no need to repeat most of what was covered in the streetlight office lore in the urban myths section. But much has changed since he was since he was last seen. He has become more aggressive due to the loss of the fixers of his office, based on what he's capable of. This part of the story that this factors into starts with San going into Zwei Association South, Section 6, to beg for help from his two friends within that association, Julia and Isadora, after Lulu and Mars didn't come out of the library alive, specifically to retrieve their books. Isadora practically told him that he's doing it wrong. He should be doing it the proper way, rather than doing what he just did. As for what Julia suggested, she suggested that they take it up with their superiors regarding this case, but this was unprofessional behavior, and Isadora couldn't let that slide, as if they acted based on personal feelings, it could lead to things falling apart, as it would encourage others to do the same. I mean, can you imagine whole buildings were full of people doing what Sam just did? So you can kind of see what she's getting at. Unfortunately, there's a problem with this, regardless, as officially, that case doesn't exist. As for what San felt about this, he felt that this was a betrayal. But Isadora reminded him that if such a deal was made, he'd have demanded or at least expected a corresponding reward, so he used them as they used him. It's not one-sided. Julia thought that Isadora was being too harsh and told her that. Isadora didn't want to see San be in the state that he was in. At that point, the Hana Association moved the library up to urban legend, which made the library a viable case, and thanks to the handling of data of Isadora and the invitation that San had on him, they sent some Zwei fixers to go into the library. After watching this, Roland then talked to Angela about the situation, the attention of an association being upon them, and how it would change things. Unlike previous guests, the guests that would come after them would have something specific in mind, mostly because a case officially recognized by an association would mean a large payoff. and as much attention, if not more, where the higher the threat level, the more we'll want to try and unravel the mystery of the library. It will take more than a professor with a felt hat to do that. Anyway, it suited Angela, as it would mean more valuable books. When asked about why she just can't leave, it's because of a curse or something about the building that prevents anything that isn't human to walk out of it. And seeing as she has about as much humanity as one on the extreme end of the political spectrum has common decency, she's kind of as far as that is concerned. Besides, she wants her revenge before she wants to leave. It's still unclear what she means by that, but it's not one that will discriminate by how she worded it. As she was quite delighted with how things were going so far. Still, the prison of her past life has fewer new things. She was learning more, all that freshness, all that knowledge, all those events and new faces. She wanted to figure out why she had to be subject to the torments that she had undergone. Well, besides life without pain having no meaning. Although that's not the answer that she'll eventually end up reaching, I suspect. It'll likely be something else, if it isn't similar to that. Yeah, sometimes the worst thing can happen when you guess what you want. As for Roland, he understood one thing from that. He couldn't leave as long as she couldn't. He wanted to take Angela to a place he frequented, a restaurant that does a meat stew, made from tenderized meat and a rich broth, which, thanks to a commissioned T-Corp tin pot, it takes 10 seconds, rather than 3 straight days. The taste is rich, and the restaurant was popular, but costly. But he considered it worth it, even if he paid half of his last job's payouts for it. He even offered to take her on a tour of the city. As for Angela, she can eat, but lacks taste buds. However, she wanted to take him up on that offer, but that would need to wait until they were done in the library. That, and they had more immediate concerns, such as the Zwei fixers, which they defeated and turned into the latest reading material. Next we have the Fragment of the Universe. Let us remind ourselves as to what this abnormality is. It resembles a child's drawing and is likely of extraterrestrial origin, and was capable of figuring out how to communicate, which helped employees in the facility figure out why it was there, and to help it to figure out human behavior. The problem was, it used its tentacles to try and impart the knowledge of the universe to grant them understanding. Unfortunately, it gave them a literal mind. As in, it them up so much that it was too much for human physiology. It drove them insane, caused permanent brain damage, or just killed them. As for how it works this time, it still looks like a gonad arc from Half-Life, with a flower on, and it still looks like a child drew it. Which is probably why it still looks like that now. Lasting impression? As for the fragment of the universe's position, its default views can be roughly translated as, I understand that this is the perfect moment to know what I know, the knowledge that I possess. That was our meaning of what I can do to deliver it. Yeah, that's right. It's not driving people insane on purpose. They just can't handle it. Along with, let us chant the song of enlightenment together. Well, it would be enlightening if those nearby were capable of handling it. Kind of like me whenever ABBA's playing. It also said, I impale you with my understanding. Cross the boundary, human. Yeah, that might work with similar sentient races, but humans? No. Then we have, we do not intend to hurt you with our knowledge. Our method is simple. The relay gives it to you. Along with, singing focuses the nerves. See in this moment existence. Yeah, it's not a malevolent entity, but it is causing damage, as if it is, not knowing the effect that it has. If Nejak doesn't have the Enlightenment card, the speech becomes incomprehensible if echoes from the beyond is used on him. Although his mind is already up, what damage could this do to him? If it is in his deck, on the other hand, it speaks of the subconscious that denies all common sense. Fragments. What is it that you're speaking of? It sees ethereal images when the glaring sun goes down, and it hears the glittering echo that it encourages those that hear it to sing it together. As for what Nejak would have to say, he couldn't forget the ringing and can hear the echoes. Then again, he couldn't be bothered to understand them. The fragment of the universe's stage is like the abnormality itself, one with the appearance that looks like it was drawn by crayons, that are a mix of dark colours, complete with stars, heart drawings, like what's on the abnormality, with a black platform. Yeah, Nejak is someone that's out of place there. After that, Roland returned to the floor of arts and woke up Nejak. Like last time, he just didn't give a. Roland then noticed something on the floor. An empty beer can. Yeah. Nejak finally has his supply of alcohol, something that neither Ian nor Angela would do. In her case, even in the script, if it allowed for it, she wouldn't. Apparently, he used the book to make booze appear from the light of possibilities. Nejak, I think J.K. Rowling's stories should be in the floor of general works, although in this case, it actually makes them appear. Then Roland asked about him sorting the books, even though he's apparently receiving guests well. He pointed at them, the randomly scattered pile of books across the floor. Roland, I think you're confusing Nejak for someone that actually gives a about what he's doing. He said before that he's forced into doing something that he didn't want to do. Again. Then Nezhak offered him some, what I assumed to be beer. Which Roland gladly accepted, not just because it meant that the apathetic junkie had some manners at least. It was a while since he had that sparkling softness. Either it was powerful stuff or he has a low tolerance to alcohol. He and Nezhak then started to relax around each other. Roland was asking how work's been doing. Nezhak said it's been going somehow. Yeah, they're both getting wasted, as Roland had just seen that pile of books. As for Nezhak's biggest complaints, it's clearly because he has to kill others, even though it's either them or him. He still doesn't like it, especially as more will be coming. And this is regardless of those that had it coming. Due to being the scum of the earth. Or if they were just trying to get by, it made little difference. I mean, a saint in that city? You do know how rare those are. In fact, you were recruited by one of them. Or at least one that's as close as possible to them. As for what Roland thinks about this, he understands what he's getting at, but it's not much different outside. It's as a certain sociopathic killer flower would put it, kill or be killed. There's no pacifist run in that city. As for where Nezhak came from, he was still tipsy, so he couldn't answer him yet. He remembered working for the Lobotomy Corporation. Roland thought that was a pretty sweet spot. It'd probably set whoever was hired by them up for life, right? Depends on the definition of life. As job security, that's not something that's good in the back streets, never mind in the nests. Roland believed that most would envy him, as it'd mean lots of cash, good welfare, and social status. None of those are any good for those that are dead, due to what happens there, where the expression health and safety would make the executives laugh loudly at how ridiculous that is, as all they care about are the results and the money it would bring them. What else is new? After hearing that, Nezhak then basically told him to shut the up and keep drinking, which Roland gladly did, much to the dismay of Angela. Now, if that was Nezhak's intention, mission accomplished! She should know him by now. Yet why didn't she stop him? Well, it shows that she's not as omnipotent as she appears to be. But what about the Zwei Association? Are they done with the library yet? No, they're not. as some are unaccounted for. Well, until next time. Hail the rabbit!